Okay, so if I don't get this off my chest and out of my body, I will actually combust. And, I do not have the wardrobe for spontaneous combustion. Okay, listen, I'm going to tell you everything, from beginning to end. And I mean everything because I can't tell it out of order. It all tangles if I try. And when it tangles, I start crying or laughing or both, and neither of us needs me hiccup crying into the receiver. So, picture this, right? I'm standing there in the godforsaken kitchen, literally ash in my hair again because those she-wolves made me scrape the hearth after breakfast. My nails wrecked, like the ugliest charcoal manicure nobody ordered. And I kept thinking, don't roll your eyes. But I kept hearing my mum's voice, soft like when you press your ear against summer grass, saying, "Be good, keep kind, I'll be looking." Which is corny, but then I'd catch myself whispering to the pots and pans like they were accomplices. That's how starved I was for decent company. It started with a twig. No, actually, it started with my mother and the way she smelled like bread and old books. And that soft patience she had that made you feel like your worst day wasn't a verdict, just weather. When she was dying, she took my face in both hands, warm even then, and she said, "Plant something for me. Something that will grow even if you forget to water it." And we laughed because I killed succulents in the past. Then she tucked a hazel twig into the pocket of my hoodie while I was pretending not to cry, and it dug into my ribs all through the funeral, like a small reminder that grief could be sharp and still be a gift. I planted it in a coffee can because that's what we had, and put it on the porch behind the house, and it grew. I forgot to water, obviously, because that's me, but rain came, and the little thing just insisted. And don't roll your eyes. It's important. The tree is important. The tree is a character in this story. My father remarried faster than any of us were ready for. I'm not blaming him. Grief makes people shop. And she arrived like a new season, the kind of season that rearranges closets. The first time she came into our kitchen, she looked around my mother's old wooden spoons and fridge magnets, holding every messy drawing I ever taped there, and she smiled with only half her mouth, and I knew it was over. She had 2 daughters, older than me by a little and by more. Sharp girls, polished and always aware of which camera lens was over their shoulder, even when there wasn't one. I'm not saying they were evil. I'm saying they were always hungry. Those are different, but they feel the same when you live next door to them. You know how they started calling me that name, right? From the cinders. I never realised how soot clings until it is your second skin. The fireplace in the old place was always hungry too. The ash crept. I'd sweep, and the ash would ghost back. It got into my hair, under my nails, into the words even. Cinder, girl, like rhyme, like the name had always been waiting for me at the end of a sentence. They made it sound like something soft and silly, but it landed like a bruise. I said nothing because saying nothing sometimes felt like the only way to survive. And anyway, Dad was travelling constantly, conferences and contracts, and when he was home, he was looking at our house like it had been stolen and replaced with a perfect replica that wasn't warmed by the same sun. At first, it was small things. "If you don't mind, could you just... Since you're here already, would you..." And then bigger. Groceries, laundry, floors. The thank yous turned into a glance, then a nod, then not even that, just expectation, and the way expectation pulls you along like a leash. If I mention the hours under the sink or the chemical burn from that time, I mixed the wrong things on the tile. It's not so you'll pity me. It's so you can feel what it felt like to be used up and invisible and still somehow lovely on the inside. I held on to lovely like a stubborn kid, holding onto a balloon string in a storm. Around then, the hazel tree got tall, like you could tuck your worries under its roots tall. I moved it into the ground when the coffee can started to look like a joke next to those branches. I'd stand there and tell it everything because trees don't interrupt. Doves started coming. Little grey and cream bodies with those melancholy eyes and cooing like conversation. They'd peck around my ankles while I whispered to the bark. Okay, yes, I know how that sounds. It sounds like I needed therapy, which, hello, obviously I did. But also the doves felt like a choir nobody else could hear. When the house felt like a mouth closing around me, I'd go outside and the tree would hold the sky open again. The worst part was the loneliness. It was this deep, aching thing. I'd just work. And at night, I'd go up to my little attic room, which they called Bohemian Chic, but was actually just dusty, and I'd sketch. Designs for dresses, for a life I wasn't living. My only real connection to my mum was her little garden out back, this overgrown, wild patch with my huge hazel tree in the middle. I'd go there and just talk to her, you know? Tell her how much I missed her. It sounds crazy, but sometimes I felt like she could hear me. Anyway, so then comes the announcement. The event of the season. The Sterling Gala, a 3-night charity extravaganza at the Sterling family's insane country estate. We're talking billionaires, royalty, the whole 9 yards. And of course, the main attraction was Alexander Sterling, the heir. You've probably seen the pictures. The man is sculpted by vengeful gods. All sharp jawline, dark, intelligent eyes that look like he sees everything, and a reputation for being intense and ridiculously private. Now we can talk about the invitation. It came on thick paper. The edges bled gold. There's this thing we do in this city, this scene where we pretend we're not obsessed with glamour, but hand us a royal crest, and every last one of us turns into whistles. It was for a series of nights at the palace. 3 nights of gala, charity, the whole machine, capped by this almost mythical dance. And yes, the prince was going to be there, and yes, the city was ablaze to talk about it before the ink was dry. My stepmother held the card between 2 fingers like she was balancing it over a candle flame. Already listed off all the things they'll need: gowns, shoes, hair, nails, inventorying out loud like some grocery list. I was standing there with my hands wet from the sink, soap bubbles on my knuckles. The twins? No, they're not twins. But you know how dressing alike can blur the space between 2 bodies until they move like one? Were already spinning up mood boards in their heads. Then there was this moment. She looked at me. I watched the decision make itself in her face. She told me, pointing at me, "You'll help. If you have the time." Like time was one more thing she could hand me or not. I asked her if I get everything done, if could I come just one night. I don't know why I asked. Such an idiot thing to do, it just slipped out. Hope is such a stupid engine, and yet there it was, eating gas. Her smile sliced. I swear she looked like such a snake. She said, "Of course you can. If I finish all my work and I can sort what needs sorting. If I can make it look like a home here." She said it in a tone that meant no. And then she gave me work with quotation marks around it, and the quotation marks hurt more than the work. And then, of course, there's a Category 5 meltdown of preparation. Facials, fittings, screaming matches over who got the last bottle of imported hair serum. I was run ragged. Of course, I wasn't going, I already knew that. Anyway, so they parade past me in their ridiculous silks. God, the ruffles on those things looked like the drapes from a cheap theatre. And they're all, "Ella, lace me up tighter. My waist needs to turn heads tonight." And I'm thinking, honey, it's not your waist that's the problem. It's that your soul leaks sour like spoiled wine. But I keep quiet, right? I do the laces, yank until my wrists scream. Then they spray perfume, like chokingly floral, the kind that has more bite than bouquet. And I swear to you, when the door slammed behind them for that first night of the festival, the hush felt holy, like this big balloon of air pressed down, then lifted, and I could finally breathe. I'm sitting there with grimy palms, staring at the fire, and I hated them so much I could taste iron at the back of my throat. I went to the tree. I loved that place. It was the one place I could speak my mind. My hazel tree grew into this stubborn hazel thing, knotty, bristly, but alive. I kept watering it, crying over it, telling it secrets, and don't laugh, those little birds that hang around. They were like my girls, my private squad, feathered therapists. So I pressed my forehead to the hazel and tilt my head at the branches. I told it the truth. Mutter all the things I'd never dare say out loud. I told it I wanted to be beautiful, how I want silk on my skin just once, how I'm tired of smelling like smoke, how I just want someone to look at me like I matter. And the tree listens. The branches quiver, the birds stir and climbed up into the branches, and next thing I know, my lap is glittering like midnight melted into fabric. A dress, dripping with dark sheen, heavy but heavenly. You know when you feel the weight of something expensive before you even touch it? That. And shoes, little fragile things that made me laugh because they looked dangerous. Like if you even exhaled on them, they'd shatter. Yet when I slid them on, they clung like liquid. I gasped so loud I scared myself. Half thought I was losing it. Half thought maybe Mum finally cashed in her promise. And I stood there, smudged face, hair like haystack, and suddenly my skin under that gown was glowing. Or maybe I just believed it was. But how? Belief makes its own light. Maybe I'd lost my mind. But honestly, I didn't really care anymore. If this was all in my head, I was still happier now than I was a few minutes ago. Or if I hadn't lost my mind, what made this magic happen? Did my mother somehow send this dress to me? I won't tell you how I did my hair because it will sound vain. Okay, no, I will. Loose, sort of put up, but pieces dangling down. A few pins I found in a box I thought was empty and turned out to hold my mother's hairpins. They were tarnished. I cleaned them with toothpaste. The smell of mint and metal made me cry like a child for 2 minutes, and then I was finished crying. And I put the pins in and breathed like a grown woman. Was this really happening? So, still wondering if I'm just hallucinating, I took the old bus to the stop by the palace and then walked the last block. The stones under my heels sang. The palace was lit like a wedding cake. Men in suits, dresses like rain. The whole city buzzing at the edges of itself. I stood there, breathless, and then I walked in because sometimes the only thing you can do with fear is use it as a dress and wear it in. Nobody stopped me. I don't know why. Maybe because when you belong to yourself, you look like you belong anywhere. My heart was pounding, like louder than the drums, convincing myself no one would notice me. Joke's on me. The second I walk in, people scatter open like a ripple. Everyone suddenly starved for a glimpse. In that moment, I thought maybe this all was some grand hallucination, and maybe I had just walked into a palace covered in grime and soot. But that wasn't it. Then I saw him. Oh God, him. Sterling. He didn't even pretend casual. His eyes nailed me in place. Sharp jaw, smile like someone slowly tearing satin. And he came straight across the floor, like the crowd was nothing but fog, and I'm getting goosebumps just retelling it. He bowed low, but not stiff, more hungry, like he expected me to let him breathe me in. I know how that sounds. It wasn't that thing people say, love at first sight, because that phrase makes me roll my eyes most days. It was a feeling like a lane cleared in a crowded dance floor, like a hand at the small of your back saying yes this way. He was taller than I expected, but that's not the part that caught me. It was the way his mouth softened when he wasn't on guard, the way other people's sentences landed on him and he took them in. The way he stood like he was holding himself to a standard nobody else could see. The scar beside his eyebrow, thin as a second thought. He saw me. He did. Not in the romance novel swoon way, not the scan and claim. He actually saw me, like the noise around us dropped by an inch, and any inch is a miracle. He came closer, like gravity. He started to ask me if we'd met sometime before. I said, probably not. That made him smile. The music found us, or we found the music, whichever way you want to write it, and we were dancing. Bodies have this way of telling the truth before the mouths catch up. His palm was warm against my back. He smelled like clean linen and something darker, maybe smoke, maybe just whatever the air around important men smells like. I know, that sounds like a terrible line. I don't know how to describe it. He had a voice like the last seat on the subway after a long day. He asked me to tell him something true. I told him my favourite fruit is a pear because it tastes like memory. He laughed and then looked at me the way people look out of windows in old movies. And for a second, the room peeled back and I could see a future through it. We danced until my legs felt like jello. People kept glancing over, and I kept pretending not to notice. And he kept making it all easier by keeping the conversation on me, which is how he was. He asked me where I'd grown up. I said near here. He asked me what I did. I said enough. He looked at my shoes and said, "If you run in those, you'll break your neck." I told him I didn't plan on running, which was a lie, I guess. He asked for my name, and I hesitated, but Ella just flew out of my mouth. He said it slow, like tasting it, and it made me tingle. When the clock hit whatever it hit, who cares about the hour? It felt like a bell tolling for me. I panicked, not because of curfew, because I could feel how easy it would be to sink into this, to forget that the morning still comes with laundry and lists and someone else's hunger. I kissed his cheek, just there, the soft place that held his smile. I said, "Tomorrow." Then I turned and I walked away. Well, more of a jog that eventually turned into a run, and I didn't look back because I wanted to keep my spine in one piece. The palace has too many stairs. The stair treads were so polished, they felt almost sticky under my soles. Like the air decided I needed to think hard about leaving. I took them anyway. A quick, careful click, 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 and then the street air hit me, and I breathed. That was night one. Wait, backing up because I forgot. When I left, he chased, like literally dried to follow after me. And I had to keep my pace up, those glass-looking shoes surprisingly steady. I only managed to get away because so people were trying to get his attention and getting in his way. My lungs burning, skirts whipping me like lashes, and I sprinted home. I took my shoes off to run the last block. I didn't want to. It felt like undoing the spell. My toes on the pavement made the whole night feel like the dream it was. Then I dove back into my life of ashes again, like the saddest, dirtiest secret. My heart hammering so much it was echoing in my ears. I hid the dress and shoes in the hollow behind my closet, where the wall buckled a little like a secret. And of course, those hyenas came back later, all braggy. Oh, everyone stared at us. Meanwhile, my scalp dripping sweat, pretending I'd been there the whole night. Right, so I didn't even sleep. How could I sleep? My body was still dancing, like every bone buzzing, my feet twitching in bed, even though one shoe was hidden under straw like contraband. I kept thinking, he looked at me like he already knew me. No, worse, like he'd been starving his whole life, and then suddenly, there I was, miracle buffet. The next morning, you would have thought nothing had happened. Maybe that's just how mornings work. The light didn't care. The kettle rattled. The washing machine thumped like an old heart in a closet. The house smelled like chemical lemon. My stepmother was high on her own reflection. And picture me, raw-eyed, sitting at the table, trying not to glow suspiciously, while the sisters drone on about the girls were telling stories about the palace like stories could make them taller. Did you hear? He looked at me. We're going back tonight. Did you see how Alexander Sterling looked at my neckline? Geez, sweetheart, the only reason he looked your way was because you were shrieking his name into the void like a foghorn. Anyway, I could tell my stepmother was mulling things over from last night, as if she was devising a way to get rid of the mystery girl who took up all of Alexander Sterling's time last night, and how to get him hooked up with one of her awful daughters instead. I don't know how they didn't recognize me. I mean, maybe it was that they'd never seen my dressed up before, or maybe part of whatever magic gifted last night to me. Still put me on edge though, wondering if she'd figure it out. Then she and her daughters went off to manicure the day and get ready again. And so, festival, day 2, same pattern. They mauled me with chores until my hands ached, then ransacked every mirror angle they could find. Stitch this hem, polish this shoe, like I'm some unpaid stylist for clowns. And once they left again, the hush, the ache in my chest, my mad dash to the tree. I went to the tree. Of course I went to the tree. I swear, my hazel friend was waiting, smug as anything, branches twitching like it knew the question I hadn't spoken. If this is where you ask how a woman gets a new gown from a shrub, I don't know. I don't have the recipe. But I think this is her doing, somehow, my mother. So I whispered, please, make me impossible tonight, and oh my gosh, the birds flitted like diamond sparks, and they dropped a dress the way water slips down glass. Pale this time, gleaming, silver white like a storm before dawn. The fabric had chill in it when I touched it, like winter snuck into cloth. I shivered just holding it. And the shoes, glacier than ever, sharper, made me blush because slipping a foot in felt obscene, so precise, like the shoe knew my skin better than I did. I pinned my hair a little tighter this time. I slid the dress on and it made my breath go high, like it rearranged my ribs. When I went to the palace, I walked in like I owned half the moon. He found me faster. He took my hand and the music did that thing where it makes your bones lighter. He moved me like the floor had no opinions. We talked. He asked about my parents, my mother. I told him about planting my hazel twig. He said he'd lost someone too, and his mouth moved like it was remembering how. He told me something small about the palace, how there were hidden hallways behind walls so staff could cross rooms unseen. He said he loved them because they made the house feel honest. No fake ceilings, just actual ones you don't always notice. He barely let me breathe. Everyone else blurred. He snapped me straight out of the room's gravity. His hand found my waist, fingertips so hot the dress ought to have smoked. We danced like we were dueling. I kept laughing, or gasping, or both. His cheek dipped, brushing mine. So close, I smelled wine and midnight on him. And he whispered something like, "Don't vanish on me this time." Such arrogance, but God help me, my knees nearly folded. We were a little giddy by then, the way people get when the room shares its oxygen, and we slipped out to the terrace and breathed the night. I kissed him because there was no reason not to, and every reason to. My hands painted the line of his jaw. He tasted like champagne and something simpler. He didn't rush me. That's the part you should hold in your teeth. He didn't push. He just let me steer, and I did, and it made my spine warm in a way that had nothing to do with the night air. He said my name and made it sound like a promise. My heart did a thing I don't have a verb for. So, I barely whispered the word tomorrow and stood up. And then, I vanished, totally bolted the minute he tried to hold me tighter. 'Cause what? I was going to stay. Reveal I'm just a soot gremlin from down the lane. Number. I ran like fire. He tried to follow me again. He didn't hide it. I heard the heel of his shoe on the stair a beat behind mine. The steps didn't feel sticky that night. They just felt long. And, oh my god, this part, he actually posted guards, blocked exits. Imagine me, breathless, skirts in fists darting behind pillars like a burglar. Still got away, barely, slipped under their noses, left him standing on the steps furious and gorgeous. I was sprinting home so hard I thought my lungs would eject. And still, next day, chores, sisters shrieking. Everything cruel repeats. By the third invitation, yes, 3 nights, we were all pretending it wasn't a ritual by then, but it was. Isn't everything? You could tell the city was drunk on itself. My stepmother had that bright-eyed gleam women get when they think they're about to be remembered for something other than the way they ironed other people's shirts. The sisters were knives and perfume. You'd think I'd be sick with nerves by now. But no, I wanted it, needed to go back for round 3, like thirst deep in your marrow. The birds were waiting for me before I even got to the back door. I loved them a little too hard in that moment. So my darling hazel tree went all in. The tree shook. The dress fell into my hands like a second skin. This third gown, oh, it wasn't fabric, it was molten sunlight. Gold clung to my body like hunger itself. It blinded me when I twirled. The shoes looked like spun fire, fragile but blazing. I nearly cried putting them on. It was too much. Too much beauty for someone who smelled of ashes most days. I pressed my forehead to the bark and muttered thank yous until the birds sang like mad. Then I went. The hall exploded. Literally, gasps, hushes, jaws dropping like dominoes. I didn't even make it across the threshold before he seized me, raised my hand to his mouth. His lips lingered long enough I could feel the burn travel up my wrist. We barely danced, more like clung and circled, swaying hard, slipping into corners where he tried to pin me with that gaze. And it was so hot, too hot, all his words like promises, half vows, wet breath at my ear. And you know I won't leave you out of the parts you want. Yes, it was more than kissing that night. Not there in the centre of the room with the eyes like cameras. Later, a hallway, a door I never would have found on my own. A room with dark wood, the colour of the inside of my mouth. He asked with his mouth and with his hands hovering, and I said yes, yes, and then I said wait once because the speed of it had started to sound like the past. And he stopped like I was a red light. He smiled at me in the half-dark like maybe he'd been waiting his whole good-mannered life to find someone who would tell him not just yes, but how. I put my mouth on his throat and felt the word prince disintegrate between my lips. He was just a man. I was just a woman. My dress slid off like it had been engineered for exit. The first touch was an instruction, the second a prayer, the third the answer. The way his hands learned me. The way I realised my body had been waiting to be looked at like a country, not a commodity. I felt like if I was going to risk my heart, I didn't want to do anything halfway. I'd never been had that way before. Almost brings tears to my eyes, I loved it so much. We both laughed after, because nerves are a thing, and sweat is a human thing, and the world insists on being funny even when your whole life is bending. The clock chimed somewhere. He kissed the inside of my wrist like gratitude. I saw the edge of the world in the window, and it scared me. How close I was to a different life. I have to go, I said, because a habit is a powerful god. He said, stay. And it wasn't an order, it was an offering. I almost took it. I almost sank. But I wanted him to want me. when morning made everything less shiny, not just at midnight when miracles happen. I put myself back together, which felt like sewing a silk dress with my hands shaking. But pattern. Midnight claws in, fear claws back, and I know I'm leaving. He knows too, and I think that stubborn man set a trap. There was an oil poured on the steps outside, or something sticky, some weird medieval prank, a weirdly timed accident, who knows. But when I fled, one shoe stuck, yanked right off my foot mid-sprint. I stifled a scream, another laugh, ran barefoot over cobblestones until my soles burned. He called my name after me. Something in me answered in a language made of sound and breath. But I didn't turn around. I just kept running. I dove into my life of ash again, chest breaking open from adrenaline, but shoe number 2 tucked safe in my arms. Heartbeat like my ribs were drumskins. So, yes, he had my other shoe. And hear me, next day, proclamations everywhere. Trumpets literally blared through streets. The Sterlings are set to find the one who fits this shoe. Cue hysteria, stepsisters losing their absolute minds, perfume clouds thick enough to choke angels. People were sending each other foot selfies like it was a fetish convention. The Sterlings did the official thing, a statement about honour and romance and seeking the woman who had won the Alexander's attention and left a token. It was corny and true and also a bit gross, the way everyone suddenly thought they were a character in a story. I stayed very quiet. I folded laundry like it was a meditation because if I stopped moving for 5 minutes, I was going to either float into outer space or explode. There was no other option. So back at our house, you won't believe it. I heard a knock at the door and a huge commotion from the girls. I was upstairs. I was listening. The floorboards were a radio. "We're looking for the woman whose foot will fit this slipper," the protocol man said, because apparently that's a sentence people get to say in real life. I couldn't believe this. They were going door to door. I was going to be found out, and maybe this whole dream will come crashing down around me. I just stood there listening. There was the sound of chairs being moved, the shoebox opening, a fragile silence, and then the show. They squeezed, they pinched. I imagined them shoving her foot into my show like a sausage encasing, heel bulging, ugly. Stepmother, total psycho queen, literally hisses, "Cut it," sliced the heel. Shoes don't fit perfect anyway, I couldn't breathe. What a vile woman, made me nauseous. Then I heard his voice, not the protocol man, him. "Is there anyone else in the house?" he asked, and everything I am stood up inside me. My stepmother said, lightly, the vocal equivalent of a shrug, "Just the girl who helps. She wouldn't have been at the palace." The silence that followed was mine, the way a room holds its breath when it's about to learn you. He said, "May I see her?" He didn't say please, but the please was in his tone. The kind of please you don't say out loud because you've never had to use the word much. It hit me like a wave up the stairs. Before I knew it, I in the doorway. My heart was doing cardio and my face was apparently serene because the protocol man smiled at me like I'd done something polite. The prince looked like a man who had not slept for 2 nights, which made me want to put my mouth where his worry lived. "Ella," he said, not a question, a remembering. I nodded. That was it. The tight string that had been holding my life taut snapped, and I didn't fall. I flew, and every cell in me said I knew it. I knew it. It was almost like it made a sound, a yes click, the universe clapping. His hands were fists pressed against his thighs, and I wanted to ask him if he was also trying not to launch himself across the room. I raised my chin. He smiled. He looked at me. Me. Soot prints on my arms, hair frizzed, eyes red, still trembling. And he smiled, slow horror to wonder, like light cracking dawn. He grabbed my hand, so tight I actually winced, and hissed something like, "Never again out of my sight." And the doves? My birds, waiting outside the window like a chorus that had been waiting for their cue. If they had been people, they would have whistled. It was applause, and if anyone pretends they didn't hear it, they're lying. He asked me to come with him right then. Dramatic, yes, but he is who he is, and I am who I decided to be, and some moments only get one shot at you. My stepmother made a sound like breaking glass and then rearranged her face in a way I recognised from bathrooms and weddings. The sisters tried to pretend they were thrilled for me in that way, where their mouths smiled and their eyes were calculating whether this made them footnotes. I looked at all of them, and in that look I said everything I'd never said. How it hurts to be asked for your hands and never your heart. How I learned to shrink so other people could have more room. I didn't say a word with my mouth. I didn't need to. Language lives all over the body. I went back upstairs and took the dress from the place in the wall where the house bowed to me. I took the hairpins from the cracked mug I'd been using as a jewellery dish. I took the photograph of my mother with flour on her nose that had been taped inside my drawer for a decade. I left the towels folded perfectly on the bed. Petty? Maybe. I don't care. The prince waited downstairs like the world was never going to end. He didn't rush me. He didn't stand in doorways like men on television do when they want you to feel watched. He talked to the protocol man in a low voice, and once he laughed softly at something, like he wasn't about to walk into a hurricane with me. We went outside. The light looked exactly like the kind of light you get when you leave on purpose. Before we left, I took him outside to meet my hazel tree. I cried such peaceful tears. The love this tree had given me, and the love it helped me find with him. The gratitude was immeasurable and stuck in my throat. I thanked my birds and sort of hoped they might follow me. The car was quieter inside than church. Trees moved outside the windows, and it felt like the city was letting me out of a tight dress. Getting where we were going felt like a complete blur. The room, the bed, the breathless hilarity of realizing you are wearing someone else's shirt in a house with more rooms than you can count. Fine. But I was terrified. Happiness is not a natural habitat when you've kept yourself small. It makes your instincts scream. It felt like standing on a balcony and choosing not to jump even though some old part of you is sure falling is the only thing you know how to do. He did that thing again where he waited for me, which is maybe the sexiest thing a man with power can do. I told him everything. Not like a confession, not like a dump truck of grief, like a breadcrumb trail back through the woods so he would know what to do if I went missing inside of myself again. The chores, the ash, the birds, the hazel tree. He listened like the story was a map he wanted to memorize. He told me his, the pressure, the opinions that came with his name, like a chorus he couldn't silence even in dreams. The hidden corridors, the rooms in his palace that had become his secret places, where he could just be skin and breath and not a title. We learned each other's lives. Okay, so some spice. So, he took the pins out of my hair like they were bones he was gentle with. He undressed me like I belonged to him because I told him he was allowed, in exactly the kinds of words that removed doubt from the air. He didn't ask, "Am I doing this right?" because his hands already knew how to listen. He knew how to start slow. My body did that thing where it becomes a yes before your brain finishes delivering the memo. When I tugged his belt, he sucked a breath between his teeth, and it made me feel taller. I love making a man beautiful with want. He was already beautiful. The way his voice dropped into his chest when I said more. The way I laughed small and shocked when he said my name like he was calling me across a river. You can write whatever details you want in your head. I'm not a camera. I'm just a woman telling you her life. It was good. I forgot my old shape. He forgot his. We remembered each other's names once in the middle, and once at the end. And because the universe is annoying, because life does not stop being life just because you finally got something you asked for, the morning still came. The staff, the protocols, the fact of being looked at, the way my face felt like public property before I'd had coffee. He looked at me over the breakfast table, and his mouth did this tiny thing that told me he knew. He touched my ankle under the table. He said, "We can make this our house, or we can make a different house. I want what keeps you happy." He is corny sometimes, in a way I want to carve into stone. I didn't even mind how fast this was moving. Everything about him felt right. I went outside with my coffee in a mug, and I don't know how they heard me thinking about them. But when I looked up, there were 3 of them on the palace roofline, like punctuation to a sentence I hadn't realised I was writing. My little birds. I whispered my mother's name. Her name tasted like cinnamon and flour. And yes, I cried. Happy, messy. My life was being made and unmade at the same time, and that does something to your insides. You can guess the rest. Wedding, vows, bells. It wasn't even that long after. Would it satisfy you if I said happily ever after and hung up? Oh, but listen, the kicker. I swear to you my little birds made it to the wedding, perched on the church rafters. So, wedding day. God. You know when you've been starving forever, like living off crumbs and fumes, and then suddenly someone places down the longest, richest feast. But everyone's staring, so you have to nibble neat instead of just grabbing fistfuls. That was me all day. I wanted to devour it, and I had to play saint instead. When I walked down that aisle, I swear the hush wrapped around my ankles like silk. Even the bells seemed afraid to drown me out. And him, standing there, body stiff in velvet, jaw taut, but eyes wild, feral, scanning every step of me like he wanted to drag me out of sight and keep me for himself. I felt my knees wobble, though the shoes trussed me steady. Birds flutter overhead, all smug, claiming ownership of this story, and the priest's words blurred like incense smoke. I was only memorizing the exact pressure of his thumb stroking my palm as we said the vows. One brush, one circle, enough to make my stomach clench with hunger he hadn't even fed yet. Ring sliding cool on my finger, tighter than iron, mine now. And the feast afterward. Endless tables, venison and saffron, sugar candies shaped into towers, wine so sweet it burned like punishment. But I hardly touched it. I couldn't unglue my eyes from him. He sat so close, his knee kept pressing mine under velvet tablecloth, every tap sending lightning through me. The sisters pretended polite chatter, but the corners of their mouths twitched bitter every time he leaned toward me, face so fragile, intimate. The day was beautiful, but it hardly mattered. My attention was locked on him, the way his fingers sussed every moment of my arm, every inch, like persistently convincing himself I was fact, not dream. And when night fell, well, let's just say, for once I wasn't the one vanishing. Now, the night. The procession dragged us through chambers, stacked with silks, gifts, coins gleaming like rivers. But every corridor narrowed into that one chamber, doors carved, bed wide enough to swallow kingdoms. He finally shut it behind, and it was like he'd been waiting his whole life to pounce. The stiffness sloughed off him like useless armour. His mouth was on mine before I could even inhale. I dropped shoes, crown crooked, hair spilling free. He pulled into his arms like gravity found its rightful object. And you know what? He groaned, low, when his hand slid down my spine and found only bare skin where jewels had slipped loose. That sound, like a promise and a plea welded together. I gripped him back, fierce, because all I'd lived was denial, and denial turns desire volcanic. I remember laughing mid-kiss, breathless, because I thought, look at me, filthy Ella, nobody turned treasure, and here I am, making a prince come undone. And he whispered in reply, something half-broken like, I thought I dreamt you, thought I invented you, and then you're burning in my arms. His words muffled against my throat, hot, damp, desperate. The bed swallowed us, sheets thick with cinnamon and lavender, every creak of wood like thunder accusing us. But we didn't blanch. His hair smelled of wind, of horse rides, of firelight, pressed into my cheek as he held me tighter every moment. And my laughter, God, it wouldn't stop, bubbling, giddy, the sound of shackles falling apart. I didn't vanish this time, didn't run when the clock bent midnight against the dome. He kept me, and I stayed, and every moment after a life of starving was bite, feast, flood. That was the real magic. He took me that night in ways that opened my mind. I didn't know what I was missing in life. The way his body felt with mine was too incredible for words. I was so vulnerable and totally at his mercy. My stomach is tightening, just thinking about it. About him. Oh, and yesterday he asked me what we should call the hazel we planted here. And I said we could name it after my mother, and he said, then it will be family. He says things like that and he gets away with it. Honestly, I should get back to him. It was so good telling you all of this. I'm going to hang up now because otherwise I'll just keep talking. And also, he's at the door, leaning on the frame like an invitation. So, I better go. All right. Well, I'll talk to you sometime soon. Bye.